we are in our interesting panel discussion today, which is on the most interesting, important, and forward looking topic, that is fast tracking the rise for fintech. And we are going to look into a lot about the data perspectives, the new infrastructure perspectives for the cloud, and what is going to fast track the growth of the fintech in the industry, what kind of ecosystems, environments are required, what are the new, we have a very interesting innovations head also amongst us. So what are the kind of new innovations that the fintechs are looking at? And we will also look at what business strategies are required to fast track the growth of these fintechs in the coming years to come, in the next 3 to 5 years, 10 years, and how are we going to create stronger ecosystems for thriving. So with me I have a very wonderful luminary panel comprising of fintechs from payment space, from lending space. We also have our technology partner, Google, which has empowered a lot of these fintechs. And most of the people who are in the panel are also former bankers and former technologists who have really achieved a lot in their career before getting into the fintech bandwagon. So let me just introduce myself to you. I am Babu Nair. I am the publisher of Banking Frontiers, and I have been trying to create a lot of ecosystems where financial services companies and the fintechs and the ecosystems would come together, engage with each other, and try to create newer possibilities for themselves. So we will every request every one of the speaker to give one short introduction, just a one-liner about what he is doing, and then we will start off with the conversation. So may I start with Samir Bhatia, please. Samir, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Samir. After spending a couple of decades in banking, working in banks such as Citibank, HDFC Bank, Barclays Bank, and a short stint at a credit bureau as well, I set up a fintech company called SME Corner. We are a non-banking finance company. We make small ticket loans to largely to retailers, and we use a lot of technology and AI in whatever we do. So happy to talk about it as we go along.
Fantastic. Welcome, Samir.
Thank you.
May I
Thank you, Babu.
welcome? May I request Vijay to please introduce yourself?
Hello everyone, I'm Vijay. I am presently CTO at BharatPay, and I've got about a decade and a half of experience in different domains in the industry, from e-commerce to travel to now fintech. And at BharatPay, we cover a very wide variety of financial services ranging from payments to lending to bill payments and a lot of other financial services also. And we primarily focus on the small retailers. So that is our very focused user base that we aspire to serve.
Lovely. So we have two retail focused fintechs any which ways in the group. Let me now request Amitabh Tiwari, who is also a very strong innovations person in this group. Amitabh, can you please share some input about yourself?
Sure. Hi everyone. I'm Amitabh Tiwari. I'm Chief Innovation Officer at Razorpay. So my area of work includes partnering with banks, engaging with regulators, do a little bit of work on the public policy side also, and I manage the risk. So risk management is another part of my role. I have spent quite a few years in the payments domain. Started out very early selling credit cards, and then slowly graduated to working on other areas of payments. So delighted to be here as part of this panel.
Fantastic. Welcome, Amitabh. And now I would request Hari Rajgopal of Samunnati to share. He is also from a very interesting domain. Hari, please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Babu. My name is Hari Rajagopal. I represent Samunnati, and we are an agri-value chain enabler. We work exclusively in the field of agriculture. I look after the strategy and capital markets domain here, where we are trying to build a highway for various services and pools of capital to access smallholder farmers. That's what we are trying to do. It's a journey which we've started on. And then for my own experience, I have spent close to a decade at Rabobank in various roles and ICICI Bank.
Fantastic. Welcome, welcome, Hari. Mitesh, can I request you to kindly introduce yourself now?
Thank you, Babu, and what a pleasure to be here with such luminaries on the panel. For all those on the attendees, my name is Mitesh Agarwal. I am part of Google Cloud and have spent about close to 2.5 decades working with a lot of the financial services players, a lot of across the industries, but specifically with financial services. Have worked with a number of the banks that I think a lot of the luminaries have been part of. Worked with a number of fintechs as well, including the ones on this panel. So here to represent Google, share some point of views, and of course, learn, listen, and be able to contribute. So thank you for the invitation, Babu.
Wonderful. Welcome, welcome, Mitesh. Paroma. So actually it is said that ladies first, but somehow I have, gone the reverse way, but I would nevertheless like to give the, hand over the mantle to you to, introduce yourself. I think Srivats is also missing. Sorry. So you're not the last. Yeah, please introduce yourself.
Thanks. Well, as Amitabh Bachchan would say, line wahi se shuru hoti hai jahan hum khade hain. So whichever way you want to put it. Anyway, as far as I'm concerned, hello everybody. I'm Paroma Chatterjee. I spent the first 7-8 years of my working life again in the banking and financial services domain with ICICI and Kotak Mahindra Bank. Then the next 5 years with Airtel, launching India's first mobile wallet in the form of Airtel Money. Then a brief stint leading the marketplace business of Cart, and over the last few years, I have been driving the business at Lending Cart, which is essentially in the space of providing financial solutions to the small and medium entrepreneurs across different industries across India. And looking forward to engaging in an active discussion today. Thanks, Hari, for organizing. Thanks, Babu, for organizing this panel.
Thanks, Paroma. Welcome. And last but not the least, let me request Srivats to also introduce himself.
Good afternoon, attendees. I'm Srivats Vadarajan. I have got about 2 decades of experience of cutting across airline subdivisions, banking, all spaces, BFSI, all sectors, and also BPO and also in telecom sector as well. I've been focused in my journey right now as a global fintech and digital evangelist, and have done a couple of entrepreneurial journey as well. Looking forward for a very intensive and a meaningful discussion.
So as a established fintech or as a scaling up fintech, what are the kind of challenges that you are seeing on the top of your mind in the near future? And how are you currently scaling up and overcoming these kind of challenges? Any of the, first let's start with a lending team member. So Paroma, would you like to take, at least let me start with the ladies first here.
Let me just talk about the top challenges that we've been facing and we continue to face right now, and we'll take it from there. One, let's address the elephant in the room, is the funding challenge for the NBFCs and the fintechs in the first place, which is the amount of funds that are available with us to continue lending onwards. The second challenge is the piling bad debts and collection efficiencies that we have as an industry have been witnessing, and particularly those of us who are in the small and medium enterprise financing, because if you look at our portfolio, close to 10% of the businesses that we have funded have permanently shut shop post the lockdown. So looking at the kind of impact that the pandemic has had on this space, realizing the outstanding loans back for us is going to continue to remain a challenge for quite some time. The third, in terms of looking forward, the growth that is happening in this space, because the SMEs growth is directly proportional to how much we who are funding them grow as well. There is an upside that we've been seeing, which we're terming green shoots during this entire festive season. But a lot of that is also pent-up demand that has been there unfulfilled over the last 6 months or so, which is seeing an upside. Whether that will sustain or not is another question mark that needs to be seen to see whether the the landscape will remain for us to continue funding. So at a high level, I think these are the three challenges, topmost challenges that we're witnessing for the moment and which we need to ride through.
Fantastic. So you have said from a lending perspective. Any other lenders would like to share? Let's keep Hari aside. I will come to your agri sector later. But Samir or Srivas, any of you from the lending perspective, do you have any other? And I will take another input from the payments teams. Samir, you are on mute.
Yeah, so Paroma clearly outlined and highlighted the three top issues that we as lenders face in the market. Let me kind of address what we've done to come over it or kind of, get around it. So on the funding side, we very successfully built great relationships with other lenders who've lent us their balance sheet over the last few years. So now almost 60% of what we originate, underwrite and collect is actually resides on the balance sheets of our partner banks and lending institutions. Now that has given us tremendous resilience in this time because it's never been a time when we worry about where the money is going to come from. And I feel the future is going to be that of collaboration because there will be people like us with origination capability on the small ticket loan side, and there'll be banks sitting with capital. So we will actually team together, and increasingly we will find this model working rather successfully as we go around. The second challenge that we've seen, and we've seen it evolve over the years, when we started off, the percentage of customers who were willing to give digital documents when we asked them for documents as small businesses was a very small proportion. The amount of transactions that would get routed through the banking channels, if they would say my sales turnover is say 20 lakhs, we would not even find 5 lakhs or 6 lakhs going through the banking channels. The balance would be cash transactions. Both the things have changed. We see that customers are now, more and more customers are willing to give digital documents, especially during COVID times. That number has spiked, percentage has spiked to a very big percentage of the total. And the second is thanks to GST and input credit, we see a substantial portion of the business now being routed through bank statements, through banking. That allows us to lend more because we as lenders get a lot of confidence. So while there have been significant systemic challenges, I think the system is also evolving to create more opportunities for people like us to grow and scale up.
Fantastic. That's a great perspective. I think we came up with solutions on one side and problems statements on the other side. We also heard some interesting solutions. Amitabh, you have been from the payment space. So how is the payment industry? Of course, the payment industry is lucky to see a lot of business, windfall gains from the business in the last few months, thanks to the growth of digital payment. How have you seen the positions changing in the last few months and the innovations are coming up?
So Babu, you're right, absolutely. That I think we were fortunate, we're lucky. Some of us who are in the payments industry, I guess we just got lucky from a business perspective. The impact that this pandemic created or left on us. That's the way I would put it. I mean, of course, you got to have the smarts and you got to have the resources and the drive to take advantage of that opportunity that comes. But I mean, let's face it, there are a lot of very bright souls, say in the petroleum industry or in the airline industry or the hospitality industry. There is nothing you can do, right? When something like this comes and hits you, then you just simply have to somehow pivot or wait for it to pass. So that did not happen to the payments industry. But I would like to delineate even that impact a little bit more. I think the offline payment industry was indeed hit hard. Look at the behavior of the consumers. I mean, everybody was in a state of lockdown. Nobody was allowed to leave their homes. Nobody was commuting to office. So the impact that, let's say, travel going down or entertainment going down or eating out, dining and hospitality going down had on a business like ours got compensated by the other digital, goods and services that started getting consumed a lot. And these were all types. These were non-discretionary kind of payments, bill payments that used to happen using cash or checks moved to digital. food people would still eat. Instead of going to the restaurant, they started dining in, right? I mean, they started ordering food to their homes, which directly helped, our industry, which is the online payments industry. Or mutual fund, etc. Lot many people, I mean, that industry has seen massive growth, which also got aided or fueled by the fact that our stock market seemed to be on fire for reasons that many people are not able to understand, right? So with that drew a lot of people, a lot of new consumers into the arena of investments, right? Mutual funds as well as shares, and that has to be digital. So that fueled our growth. I mean, we also experienced a dip when, for the first time, the pandemic hit. Everybody's reaction is that of panic. You care for your own and your family and friends' safety, right? That's your priority number one, and then you try and figure out ways of reinventing your way of doing business, or even day-to-day activities. So your broadband and remote working, all of that settled down in 2 months' time. Then our business started taking off, and I think the net effect of some of the sectors going up, whether it's let's say OTT or gaming segments, because if people can't go and socialize, then they will have to find other means of entertaining themselves. So these segments going up, or other businesses reinventing themselves and becoming digitized. So the net impact for us was positive. But initially we went down. We had a significant drop in our volume in the first month. We recovered a little bit in our second month, but by the time October came, we are now we are significantly up from our March numbers. So how were we prepared for it, and how did we innovate? Look, I think we are anchored very deeply in our commitment to small businesses. And I think that's one segment which was hit really hard during the pandemic, because as it is, small businesses need to manage their working capital really smartly. They need to manage their collections really well. I mean, and the cost side, both of that they need to manage well. For many, collections dried up, whereas the costs still continued to be there, and people had various degrees of success renegotiating terms. So all in all, that sector was really reeling, right? And that's where we we draw our strength from, or that's what we anchored in. Our philosophy is to make money management absolutely simple and painless for the small medium businesses. So what we did was, we tried to, I mean, there was a massive surge in demand for digital means of payments, payment links, payment pages. Even brick and mortar merchants wanted those kind of solutions. So we were quick on the ball. We reoriented ourselves. We made sure that the last influx of merchants into our systems, that gets taken care of well, supported well, integration pangs are taken care of. We also came out with this POS solution called ePOS, which was a combination of a way of generating a payment link and a QR code based payment. So that and a series of other innovations we drove, thinking from the perspective of the small businesses and the challenges that they would be facing. So that's how, Babu, I would say, we tried to sort of leverage this. But if you talk about payments in general, I think the ATM industry, I think the physical POS industry has been hit. The impact has not been all that great for them. Yeah.
What is your take on it, Hari? What is the way forward now? Let us talk more from the way forward.
Well, see, this pandemic has demonstrated the resilience of agriculture as a sector, and indeed the criticality of agri value chains overall to our economy. Because whether we are indoors or outdoors, the farmer is still in the field. He or she is still tilling the land, and value chains are still evacuating that produce to our doorstep, whichever channel of retail we are using to buy our produce, our staples, our fruits and vegetables, the milk. So in a sense, the criticality of the value chain, the policy support it received, but also the resilience of agri value chain as an economic activity was demonstrated under these exceptional circumstances. I think that is where the digitization of agriculture, which would have in normal circumstances taken longer to happen and to happen at the regular rate of growth, this space has been accelerated due to this pandemic. Because as you see that the role of super aggregators and digital aggregation has gone up because traditional supply chains got disrupted. Similarly, the role of the pharma collectives, which have been around for a while, gained a lot of traction as alternative channels to access smallholder farmers. So, in a way, the reorganization of the agricultural supply chain and the role of digital in making this happen has both accelerated due to this pandemic. And we see that a number of changes that have taken longer to happen in the normal course of action have got accelerated. For example, the new farm laws, which have come in as reforms in the current package of reforms from the government. I think this would have otherwise taken a long time to come through. And then we see that as a broad positive for farmers and farmer organizations to get a greater slice of value. So in a way, we are overall positive about the potential of agricultural value chain, and therefore the scope of providing market linkages and working capital, which are really the two plugs that need to get into the value chain to take it to a higher equilibrium, which is what we are working towards.
Let's ask the tech leaders. For example, technology is surely one of the most important pillars for any fintech. And while scaling up for the next big one, what are the key technological factors also that you have to look at? Because you are anyway scaling up now. We are all seeing a rise slowly. The markets are looking promising. What are the key technological factors now to consider to manage the kind of scale that is coming up? Market is already on fire now. May I have Srivaths share some perspective followed by Vijay on this? A quick two-liners on.
Sure. Thanks, Babu. So more this pandemic has been a wake-up call for the traditional players who went into the tech space, especially the banking domains where people have been into huge, large legacy technology investments being done. But the clear edge was with the fintech players who were with the modern technology and was with more of an open API architecture and hybrid cloud as a method that they have institutionalized in their architecture. What's very important in the entire technology framework is to convert or translate the business understanding, which means identifying the core entity with which the technology components gets interacted with. So if you want to triangulate and understand who are the core components with which all these components actually in the connect layer connects is the customer, second is the employee, and third is your partners. So from the forward-looking technology perspective, whatever channel through which you connect and create that user interface and experience, if your focus is not getting the relevant data coming to your repository and thereby creating innovations, it's not going to work for you. You might be a great organizations in lending space from underwriting perspective. We might be a great insurer in creating an health and life insurance product, or in the BFSI space, you might be a great fund manager creating pool of funds. But none of them is going to sustain for long run when you don't collect the data according to the changing business environment and business models. So what's the fundamental shift that has happened in the economy is the business model itself has got changed. And typically, if you look at MSME as a core sector, the 61% of MSME, which fuels 32% of the economy, have fundamentally has realized that they need to have a makeshift into the way they operate. They've realized that logistics is going to be very key. They've realized that having enough working capital requirement to have stock keeping is very important. And they have realized that alternative to their channels of traditional mode of their shop, like digital ecosystems like e-commerce, either of having their own website with transactional capability or to type with e-com capability with payment space has become very inevitable. What is going to be a game changer in the fintech and digital space is the provider who looks into the solution to be provided to these merchants end to end in order to collect the data and thereby produce the products. If we are going to go with an attitude of specialization and not with an attitude of generalization and solving the problem of end MSME, it's not going to be a sustained business model going forward. So next 1 decade is going to be clearly for the players who are going to combine the business, the digitech and the fintech model towards the end consumption solution and core focus on the data, the key data.
Vijay, any new thoughts or any different thoughts from you on what kind of technology pillars are most important now for the fintechs now?
That said, it's not automatic. I mean, it takes a lot of effort to convert that data into analysis, and then into intelligence, and then into products, or more valuable, more useful features for our customers. I'll give you an example. Personalization is one very, very big benefit that we can derive from the data, the technology that we have these days. I mean, a lot of companies are collecting a lot of data these days, but a challenge remains to convert that data into something which is very meaningful for the customers.
So Mitesh, let me ask you something about cloud, because I think we all use cloud a lot and you're the right person here. So, clouds and regulations and things like that, it's all getting built well over time. So how do you think organizations can harness the power of cloud and grow and scale their businesses? What has been your experience with the kind of companies that you worked with?
So if you really look at it, I mean, the whole segment around cloud has evolved, right? I heard, for example, one of the panelists speak about hybrid cloud. So I think that journey started way back with virtualization, people talking about hybrid cloud. But when we talk of cloud here back at Google, 22 years back, we started on what is now termed as the public cloud. It just so happened that we never opened it out to, the world. But if you look at all the 9+ billion, I mean, we have 7 Google properties that have more than 1 billion+ interactions every day, right? Whether it's YouTube, whether it's Maps, whether it's, Google Pay, and so on and so forth, right? So therefore, over the last few years, as we spoke about cloud, we continued to, invest in fundamental technologies around that, right? So to me, it involves the whole infrastructure modernization piece. It involves modernizing your applications and eventually, therefore, being able to give a much better customer experience. Now, you could potentially do that, on the public cloud. And as you said, there are a bunch of regulations that are evolving out there as well. Secondly, what we've seen is that we've seen that to be really a journey. Customers have begun at a point, and that includes financial services providers as well. So we see a lot of interest on the data side. We see a lot of interest on the AI side. We see a lot of interest in the customer acquisition, customer servicing side, customer onboarding. Especially in the pandemic, we saw a bunch of our cloud technologies being used on customer onboarding. And of course, there is the whole angle of infrastructure modernization, where we see a lot of our customers use cloud as well. The regulations around that are primarily, around sovereignty, which is usually mistaken to be just data sovereignty, right? But I think they're getting fairly clear now. And we've seen a number of financial services institutions. And I would say, fintechs have been like a great way in which
it's a great boon, actually, Mitesh, because we don't have to spend on infrastructure, buy servers, maintain them, obsolescence, everything, right? I mean, we're so happy using the cloud that we couldn't have scaled up if it wasn't for cloud, honestly.
Absolutely. And the interesting element for me, Samir, has been because, earlier, I also heard about there are some businesses that have not done well. Now, imagine if you were in a capex investment, it doesn't matter. You've already made the investment. The spinning down also has been an equally big boon during the pandemic, right?
Absolutely.
So that also has been a good thing. You only pay for what you use, right? So
for example, we were paying 50% of our bills only because we scaled down. We didn't require so much processing to be done. We could not have done that if we owned the servers ourselves.
Absolutely.
There is a lot of security and compliance that has also to go with infrastructure when we go into this entire model of use and pay cloud and things like that. How are organizations balancing, and along with that, the innovation has to go also together. So these are the two of the things that has to go together. How are organizations balancing this, security, compliance, and innovations put together? How are they actually taking it to the next level? How are cloud companies supporting in that, and how are CTOs working towards that as well? Would you like to take a shot on it, Srivatsa, first?
Sure. Sure.
So strategically, when you look upon cloud and when you look at, you need to definitely not ignore your risk and compliance angle, and also the regulation, because most of the BFSI space is regulated either by, if they are listed, they are regulated by SEBI, and or else they are the ones who are listed by RBI. So there is no clear policy or guidelines that has come. It's still open ended. But to be on the safe side, the few basic principles that has been taken care by most of them is to ensure that whichever cloud, public cloud or secured public cloud, which I call for, the first thing which they take into consideration is it's hosted out of Indian region. That gives enough of comfort level for the organization and also for the regulation, and also the government also plays a very important role, the finance ministry out here, because you need to definitely protect the data. End of the day, it's not the company that is responsible for the data, right? It's also the government and the regulation which is responsible for the end consumers. So it's a joint responsibility. So it's important the data has to reside in Indian region. One, strategically, you need to, as an organization, understand the sensitive data and the non-sensitive data. So which means when you architect yourself, if you look upon your processes like workflows or some of your processes which does not require to store heavy amount of data, can be on cloud. But especially your transactional data, which are like in ODS and data warehouse, can be in an hybrid model. It can be into an data center where it's hosted and you guard yourself, especially because most of these cloud players have also become indirectly a competition, especially when they come into payment space. They compete with you, and the data residing with them, you never know. The terms and conditions are meant, but you never know. You need to take care of, you're the custodian for your customers and their data. So that's how you sail through with an hybrid strategy, where you have your core customer and transaction data still with you, and the non-core and other data which is not very critical for the organization and the processes which are not that sensitive with data can reside on cloud, and that's how you manage it. But the architecture is very important because cloud looks very good to have. You need to optimize it very well. If you fail to optimize it very well in your processes, your bills are going to go to your rooftop. So you need, it's a double-edged sword. So you need to be very careful when you tread through it.
Fantastic. So, Amitabh, you have been a person into risk as well as from innovation. I think these are two very, very interesting things that you have to manage together, and especially from an insurance background, from a risk management background, when you also look into innovations, you cannot stop either of it. How do you manage to balance both this? What kind of policies do you put into place to make sure that on one side you keep innovating, one side you keep collaborating, on the other side you manage the risk as well?
So, ours is a regulated industry, Babu, and it also is an industry which has got several stakeholders whose roles are pretty well defined. So, while you do make a difference to the pieces that you control, you obviously need to depend on the excellence and the efficiency of other components of the ecosystem. Traditionally, payment acceptance or payment acquiring has not been considered a very high risk business. Because you are in the business of collecting payments, so in a sense you taking the risk, because somebody else has the payment due to you, and networks obviously play an important role there by guaranteeing you the payment that is due to be settled to you. So where does the risk really come? I mean, the risk comes mainly from the perspective, and especially in the online world, when you are digitally onboarding customers, when you are validating their documents digitally. So risk comes in terms of making sure that a business is actually doing what they say that they are doing. Because in case of a digital business, it's very easy to create a front and possibly, end up doing something else. The point of truth is when you are allowing a merchant to come through the door into your environment. At that point in time, we obviously do all the necessary checks, whether it's KYC or whether it's actually looking at the website or the app which is driving the merchant's business. We also make sure that we have a good sense of the business model of the merchant, and there are any inconsistencies that we look at. In fact, later during the conversation, you probably may want to bring this up, but you try and use AI and ML as much as possible when it comes to risk, because there are thousands of data points that you have, especially when you are onboarding a lot of customers and a lot of transactions going through. So you try and help your algorithms learn, and you try and see if there are patterns emerging. So that's the first point. And then of course you do the merchant lifecycle management, and you keep a keen eye also on the information which is coming from external sources. I mean, there are alerts coming from, say, networks, your bank partners, and also on the social media, right? Today, the social media channels or even other media channels, they will write something which you need to pick up smartly and as early as possible, and that will give you early warning signs. So that's the second piece. And third, of course, is in case something does happen, something does go wrong, then how swiftly do you move to take control, and more importantly, how do you alleviate the problem that your customers finds themselves in. So we work with external tools. We have our own in-house engine built, right? The whole idea is that to be able to serve your customer, which is a merchant in our case, how do you make sure that in order to keep those 2 or 3 or 4 people who are probably not I would say trustworthy, or who have got, let's say, ulterior motives in trying to gatekeep them or keep them away, you should not be inconveniencing the balance 95, right? And that's the philosophy we work with. And as as a startup enterprise, our whole philosophy is that take risks, take them thoughtfully. We do not believe in overthinking a problem, so long as, like I said right at the beginning, we are in a regulated business, right, where compliance is uppermost in everyone's mind, and we work with banks, which is why we are always very, very cognizant and conscious of being compliant. However, within those parameters and within that framework, we make fast decisions. We try and mistakes, fail fast, and learn from that, but then make sure that the same mistake is not repeated in the system. When you are at a small scale and you fail, or if you're running experiments and you fail, which is something that we do very regularly, right? We conduct multiple test and learn experiments, right, with finite timelines, and we try and see how it behaves, right? And then once something has happened, has been sort of analyzed from all possible perspectives, then you deploy it and make it run at scale. So that's the approach that we take. Like I said, we work with internal negative list, external databases. We use all sorts of digital methods for validations. All of that we do, but we at the same time we also try and use all of the tools at our disposal, whether let's say it's machine learning, or whether it's social media, let's say inputs, somebody talking something really sort of bad about a merchant, about an experience someone had. All of those things combine to create the framework for keeping the our business environment safe. Of course, I'm not delving into the attack side. Those happen all the time, and that's altogether different discussion, and a fairly detailed discussion on how you make sure that your systems are safe and secure against hackers, against attackers, right? We face that all the time, right? That's the reality of life. You can't escape that if you are in the payments domain, and if you are a digital payment processor, you will always have attacks happening on your systems at all times. And
we will actually take this constantly, this conversation about security and attacks soon. But in the meantime, you have actually put a 360-degree perspective. You spoke about AI, you spoke about innovation, you spoke about GDPR and the kind of things put together. And with that as a lead, which you have been speaking, I think I would like to ask Mitesh also. Mitesh, from the industry, if you see from the various sources, the kind of data multiplication is very, 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 very increasing drastically day by day. Multiple sources of data, multiple possibilities of doing analytics. How are organizations with which you are working also trying to take things forward? How are you seeing organizations, especially in the fintech side, going forward with this?
Yeah, so thank you, Babu. I think the business part of the requirement is fairly clear now, right? If you look at the new generation of our customers, they've essentially grown up in what is being termed as a digital age. And earlier, the organizations used to talk about having digital as part of the strategy. I guess it's no more digital being part of the strategy. Digital is the strategy for everybody, right? And therefore, data becomes like core and center of everything. And I think a couple of the panelists very correctly pointed out to that whole area. So this is about, how can all of the organizations, especially fintech, start treating data as an asset, right? And really be able to, make the experience for their customers more richer, be able to roll out features faster. How do you use your customer base really, to start, truly monetizing, the customer base? How can you cross sell? How can you upsell, right? The other part of the whole data equation is how do you start connecting with your partners in the ecosystem, right? So you have a bunch of APIs that you go out there and expose, right? And therefore there's a lot of monetization opportunity available there as well. The other part of data is, really being able to use databases itself, right? How can you, more efficiently be able to scale up and scale down? How do you provide better SLAs? How do you, be able to really have the relational semantics in place, and so on. And Google's doing a number of things, around these spaces for sure. Now, if you look at analytics particularly, obviously we have a huge data management portfolio. We have a huge analytics portfolio. We have a number of customers on this panel itself and many more who use one of our products, which is BigQuery, quite extensively. We have the ability to use all sorts of existing sources to really mine data and meaningfully be able to give that back to you. So to me, it's about being able to look at the whole life cycle experience that you want the customer to do, whether it's with onboarding, the way they would transact on your platform, and then be able to service them, and then be able to cross sell and upsell. And I think data then becomes kind of center and core to that. And of course, I think Amitabh very rightly pointed out to areas of AI, which I'm sure we can have interesting conversations around.
I was just talking about Amitabh having shared about AI being used extensively for risk assessment, and Mitesh brought about the whole life cycle angle. I think what the need of the hour at fintechs and across is more integrated AI approach. So when you look at the 5 stages in let's say a lending business, you have a customer origination to customer information gathering as the second stage, to assessment of the customer, risk assessment and credit underwriting of the customer as the third stage. Fourth is actual fulfillment or disbursal of a loan or a credit product. And fifth is collections or taking it back. So if you have an integrated AI approach where at the origination stage itself, you can use data to predict who is the customer who's most likely to apply for your product, who's the customer who it is going to be cost effective to reach, who's the customer who is best reached through what kind of channel, including who needs to be reached through a vernacular mode of communication, who's likely to download an app and apply from there, who needs to be targeted through ecosystem partnerships, such as whether they're working with an e-commerce player as a seller, or whether a merchant is a restaurant, a Zomato or Swiggy. So what's the best channel to reach? Using data to predict the way you do customer origination becomes the starting point. And then integrating that with collecting information, whether it is from these partners about the historic business data that is available with the partners, to use information like that for underwriting, or plugging into a lot of external ecosystems that are evolving right now, including, for example, the account aggregator program, where a lot of data is centrally hosted across different companies, and getting access to that data and being able to pull it real time and use that in your decision making. So that becomes integration of that same thing into the second stage of the process, which then feeds into the overall risk evaluation, where you no longer, and we've all evolved through that journey of no longer really needing credit underwriters to look at cases or process, but more define the rules into the algorithms so that the machine keeps learning based on behavior of those micro segments of customers and keeps fine tuning your algorithm or logic to underwrite. And then again, using data and various online systems available, whether it is the NACH as a simple example, to disburse electronically and collect electronically. And last and most importantly, to have predictive collections also, to be able to know using data, whether it is past performance data or bureau data or their performance on their core business, whether it is an e-com platform, or the performance on other credit products, whether it's a credit card or a loan held from somewhere else, or it is even social media behavior, which says that somebody's gone out of the country, which is posted on Facebook. I mean, triangulating all of this information to even predict who's likely to repay and who's likely to delay and who's likely to default gives a lot of power to the fintechs to create a total integrated approach using data to run the business much, much more efficiently and for scale.
Fantastic. You actually put the discussion to a very interesting point, especially about analytics and data. Everyone, I think, is in different stages of using this analytics and data for their businesses. And there are people who are using analytics and analytics for business in various silos today. Some for the channels, some for the branches, some for different sets of activities, etc. So the one missing piece that I often see in this entire exercise is the integrated kind of approach for analytics and data. Samir, how have you have been doing a lot of work. You have worked in a bureau, you have worked in a bank, you are working in a now you are definitely doing a very interesting fintech business. How do you see the data evolving now, the business of data analytics evolving, and how is it integrating together to give a very different kind of approach?
So the offerings of the bureaus have changed substantially over the last few years. From the time when I used to run a bureau, it was more like data reports and general stuff. Now it's more about analytics. And the quality of information that's available now to fintechs, right from deciding where to open your business, what to lend, who to lend to, which segment, which zip code to lend to, everything is available for you to decide where to scale up your business. And analytics, most organizations have built in-house capability on analytics. I don't think anyone now has the luxury of relying on external analytics capabilities, because the businesses, it's become like a very core part of any company. So every company has, so we have an analytics team, and they're able to, just like Paroma said, I don't want to repeat, just work at every stage of the business. To every piece of data that's available is of immense value and helps us through the entire life cycle of the company. And the quality is improving. If you ask me how it's changing, the quality is improving. The kind of data that is available is improving. It's more dynamic now, and so data is available pretty much real time. So we can get data for yesterday, today. For example, we work with a lot of B2B partners, and we lend to their constituents, and we are able to get transactions as of yesterday from them. And so the data is real-time data. We are no longer working with last quarter's data or March end data and trying to figure out what's happening with everyone. So the landscape is changing, and it's becoming really exciting. It makes our job easier in terms of portfolio management, in terms of choosing who to lend to, and also in terms of who's likely to default and who to collect from. So I think it's actually great.
So if I understood the question, it's around, experience on integrated data.
Yeah.
So actually, so if you really look at it, Babu and the panelists, right? I think Paroma, gave the whole life cycle very nicely, right? At the end of the day, what we've seen is data trails from your customer usage, right? Whether they are starting, their what's their life cycle, how do you, really take care of that whole life cycle, and then you leave a trail and you start really gathering insights from that, being able to, really provide those insights to, the organization internally. So in my mind, one of the interesting things we found is that, obviously machine learning really helps you a lot in that space. There are a number of AI engines that, for example, Google has developed very clearly that can be used to, mine that data, be able to, derive really insights out of that data. And very interestingly, most organizations, while they have a huge volume of data, the reality is that perhaps it's only 5 to 10% of the data that's really useful. The question is, how quickly can you get to that 5 to 10% of data, right? Because the rest of the data is really not really useful. It's just data sitting there and occupying a lot of space. So I think the ability to process data faster is equally important, and that's where I think cloud can really help, because your performance for data could be much better. The second area is, then how do you derive insights and how do you present that back to the businesses? So, for example, if you're in the collections organization, how do you present that data differently versus if you are, in the marketing team versus you are in the sales team? So, how do you start presenting that data in a far more efficient way? So, Google's got a number of technologies around that. Looker is one such technology that really helps you visualize data very differently, very uniquely, specific to your needs. So what we've seen with all of this is that there is a lot of influx of data, but the real need is to be able to process data faster, be able to present it faster and more usefully in terms of deriving insights for the specific team. I think that's essentially where our focus has been. And of course, Google has always been a data-driven company, right? And we are very responsible about how we handle data securely and make sure that we never on Google Cloud collect customer data at all, right? Your data is always your data. Back to you, Babu.
Sorry, fantastic. So that is a great perspective about data. And data today also is equal to that of experience of the customer. Experience is one of the most important and differentiating factor that actually differentiate your services when compared to others. And one of the most deciding factors in experience is also the way how you put this data into use, at the same time managing the privacy of the customer. Uh, as payment companies, especially, Vijay, you have been in the forefront of retail payment and rural payment and things like that. I'll come to Hari also. How have you been redefining experiences for your customers in the payment space?
So data once again plays a very important role there, and like any digital business strives to really excel on the customer experience, because with digital platforms, the thing is that reaching to customer becomes easier, but it's also easier for the customer to switch to a competing platform if any business is not giving a very good customer experience. So it becomes very important to give a great customer experience for any digital player, and we are no different in that sense. So we strive to give like the best of the breed customer experience to our merchants. And as a payments company, it becomes really important for us to make payments as convenient, as seamless as possible. So the whole payment cycle needs to go through quickly, very predictably, very reliably. The customers need to get updates about the money they collect, the money they pay. Like they should also be able to like keep a tab on like ours is merchant payments business, so they need to be able to keep a tab on like how much they've collected so far in the day, how much money they're going to get into the bank. And if we like connected with the lending side also, then what also becomes very important is like how easy and how convenient it is for the merchants to apply for let's say a loan, how easy and how convenient it is for them to repay that loan. Right? Are the terms really tailored to every merchant's particular business cycle? Some merchants have a weekly off, and then that weekly off will lie on different days of the week. So how does that affect the payments and the lending side of things? Some merchants have a seasonal business, some merchants have a not so seasonal business. So there are lots of variables, lots of parameters to take care of, and every merchant rightly expects the service to be highly tailored to their particular needs and use cases. So there are lots of things to do with data and technology there. And of course, trust and reliability is paramount with a business like payments. So security is like absolutely a must-have. Like there is zero tolerance for any security lapses, because like one breach and the whole trust will collapse. So merchants, like for them it is their hard-earned money. Like so even if there is like 1 rupee here or there, they lose trust in the platform, and that is a very big thing. And so we need to take care of like everything is like security front, everything is absolutely flawless.
Absolutely. And that is not a compromisable area any which
Not
ways.
at all.
So Hari, any specific experience from your side when it comes to customer experience? Yours is a very different class of customers any which way. So how are you redefining experience, especially with all the data and things?
Sure. And then it is quite different because we haven't yet got to artificial intelligence in reading a farmer aggregator's balance sheet, and we hope we'll get there. But I think what defines our customer space and the category of customers we serve is that firstly, there's very little data, and then how to generate that data and then how to analyze that data is where we have put in a fair amount of work. So on one dimension, of course, the way we have started is the offline way of gathering data, meeting customers, analyzing financial statements, bank statements, GST returns, mandi receipts, various forms of creating a financial picture from an underwriting perspective of a customer, whether it's a farmer collective, whether it's a agri enterprise. So the first way has to be in order to first create the data to then analyze it, because otherwise you would just rely on past indicators, which in our space is not a perfect way of appraisal. Now, how do you go forward from there? And that's where we have now tried to first digitize the data of our customers. In a way, digitize profiles of farmer producer organizations and create a picture of how many farmers are there who are members of a farmer collective, who are they, what do they grow, and here AgTech is playing a huge role in helping us digitize this data. That if we can firstly create a picture of what is this farmer collective capable of, what do they do, and what is their track record, only then can a more systematic and smoother appraisal be done. So on one hand, we are digitizing farmer and farmer aggregator, farmer cooperative data, and AgTech solutions are playing a huge role. Now, the next is how do you process this data and get it into one place to help underwriting for purely financially, firstly, from a larger set of lenders? Can we make it in a more presentable, accessible form to enable large banks, financial institutions to take risk in agriculture, which they haven't done? And that's where now we have focused our efforts in creating as a generic term for facilitating large banks, large lenders to actually see how FPO credit or farmer agri enterprise credit can be underwritten. So first, from creating the data, assessing it, to first enabling others to assess it as other financial institutions. The moment you create this kind of a data pool, it is not relevant only for financial institutions. It is also relevant for other buyers, other sellers, the input companies, the agro processors. And that's where the next wave of work really is in helping create entities that are accessible, engageable by the large market forces, which is on the input side, on the output side, on the service side, on the insurance side. Because agri insurance does not go below the block level, because you have no data below that. There is no way for us to assess what is the actual crop loss in a given farm, in a given village. And therefore we use proxies, which are imperfect at best. So it is this process of data digitization and making it in a semi-processed form for various market forces that we can really make these forces engage with our customers and make the value chains work more efficiently. So that's where a lot of work has gone in forms of creating a platform that can make our customers engage with market forces more efficiently and vice versa. So I think that's the context here. And once this is ready, is when we can apply machine learning algorithms and artificial intelligence systems, and we have to get there, but it's a journey. And I think the initial signs are extremely encouraging.
Great. So I think the time for discussion is over, but I think we will take one last question. Before that, Mitesh, do you want to share any perspective on redefining experiences, especially from the customer's perspective, customer experience perspective? A quick one before we take on the last question.
Yeah, so I think there are two parts that I want to bring in, especially because we have fintechs on this panel, right? I think the customer experience part is super critical, as has been discussed before. And data is at the heart and center of it. But there are also there's another angle that I think each of these fintechs, all of you have like huge number of developers. So the way I would look at it is that, fintechs need to treat developers exactly like they treat their customers, because developer experience is becoming like a super top priority everywhere, just like customer experience is a top priority. So it's, I think, very important that, we marry both, especially because of the way we are, driving, feature rollouts faster and faster. And therefore, if I really look at it, you're producing APIs at the end of it, right? So you've got consumers of APIs and you've got producers of APIs, and the developer experience sits, at the center of it. Then you use data, and the third part is, of course, use a whole bunch of, areas in AI, really able to, enhance your whole, customer experience.
Interesting. So let me quickly move on to that. Samir, do you have to add anything more from the experience perspective, since you have been working a lot in the experience area? You are on mute, Samir.
Babu, a lot of it has been covered by the other experts.
Perfect.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
So let's get into the last set of questions, that is basically on the ecosystem. What is the ecosystem of tomorrow looking like for the fintechs? It can be from the payments perspective, from the lending perspective, from the innovators perspective. Maybe Srivats, you want to take a shot on it immediately, and then we will move on to others.
Yeah. From the future perspective, you need to stitch in your complete architecture from the outside in perspective, which means you need to have your the connect layer, the API layer, the core layer, and the data layer to work seamlessly. Now, this is more from the technology perspective. But from the end connect perspective, that's exactly what Hari said applies to all business. You need to understand how do you generate data and capture data across the value chain. What's happening right now is when we focus on one particular segment, say in tier, for example, tier 3, tier 4 for an MSME or a retail customers from a payment space perspective, what we fail to understand is he's not only your partner, but also he's your future consumer. And he's also your extended arm for getting your customers who can help you to do a lot of cross-sell, upsell. And beyond this, when you generate the data, you need to understand how do you facilitate and go deeper in the engagement and cut across this data across value chain and create that interfaces with the last mile. So what's the problem statement right now in the fintech and also in the ecosystem space is either we concentrate on the last mile or we concentrate on the first mile. We don't look upon the value chain as a complete end-to-end integrated ecosystem, and that's the approach that requires to be changed from a business model and then technology architecture both put together perspective.
Fantastic.
That's growth lies.
That was a crisp and a fast answer. Srivas, thanks for that. Amitabh, from your perspective as an innovator and as a risk manager, what is your idea about the ecosystem of the future for the fintechs?
So I think a lot of the important topics have been covered by the panelists, and it's been a very interesting discussion. I mean, usage of data, making sure that data is core to all decisions that are taken, all business decisions, and it straddles across all aspects of the business, whether it's customer experience or segmentation of your customers, and therefore choosing the right methods to reach out to them. So, data is obviously key. And I guess the fintechs have designed themselves also fully understanding the importance of data in today's world. I mean, us included. We knew the importance of data right from the time, we started operations, and it's an asset that we fully utilize. I think the ecosystem of the future will have some of the early age companies who we serve, who are digital first, customers and business models. Those will grow to become big, and with them, companies like us will grow. So it will look, if I were to sort of, gaze into the future, maybe 4 or 5 years time. Somebody already said in the course of the discussion that it's not a part of your strategy. Digital now is the strategy, right? So that's how it's going to look like completely in 4 or 5 years time. And thankfully, with the regulator playing its part and the consciousness about the security and safety of the ecosystem growing, I think it will be a fairly safe and secure, payments and digital commerce ecosystem we will have.
Fantastic. Paroma, any shot you would like to take on this? Anything more you have to add?
Yeah, couple of things which I visualize also evolving in parallel is again from a consumer experience lens. I see a lot of voice vernacular enabled technologies coming to the fore in terms of applications for financial products happening through voice transactions. A lot of is one. Second, I also see the overall digital tech ecosystem working together rather than the situation today where each entity or company tries to do everything on its own. Like, for example, an e-commerce player which has sellers on board is trying to give credit lines to the sellers, as well as make other services available to them. I see all of them coming together and different, and somebody specializing in origin, somebody specializing in the lending, somebody specializing in the business transaction, coming together and creating a service. So I see a lot more ecosystem working together happening in the near future. Third, I see a lot more product innovations happening here as well, because one of the things, the types of products have been more or less within a certain realm around typical working capital loans, invoice discounting, etc., standard names and labels. I see a lot more innovation happening there based on very specific use cases, like Samunati is doing stuff on agricultural loans, for example. So I see a lot more product innovation happening in the future. Fourth is I see a lot of information sharing as well. Like today, each one of us hosts our data end to end and uses analytics on our data and creates frameworks and models. I see more of us coming together and creating a unified data platform. Like the bureaus came together earlier to share risk data, which was made available to all. I see not just risk data, but a lot of business and customer information also coming on one platform to be consumed by different people in whatever form that is needed. These are the four things I see happening. And the fifth thing that I hope will happen is from the regulators and a lot more experimentation and sandboxing allowed to the fintechs. So whether it has been with Aadhaar, KYC, or video KYC, etc., in terms of process, in terms of products, allowing us to try different products out, different processes out, to do a lot more sandboxing to evolve the way fintech of future in India will happen is something that I'm very hopeful of.
Fantastic. Fantastic. That was a good encapsulation. Mitesh, anything you would like to add on this?
Yeah, so I think the panelists have said a lot of great things, and according to me, AI is really going to be that differentiating factor for a lot of the lines of businesses, right? Whether you use them for OCR in the eKYC process, right, or the fintech companies using a lot of documents. As we know, you need to curate those documents, make sure that there's a document understanding, and Google's got a fantastic document understanding AI engine. If you look at the area of lending, we specifically just launched a lending AI module, which transforms really your whole loan experience for borrowers and lenders, because we've now managed to automate the whole mortgage document processing. Another area which we found is a lot of cloud native applications being developed grounds up, and that is really happening a lot on the Google data and ML platform. And of course, the whole value of AI in the field of cybersecurity, fraud detection, forensic analysis, all of these are fantastic focus areas. And with Google Cloud, I think there's a lot of differentiation that we can help our customers with.
Fantastic. That's a good technology side encapsulation. Samir, anything you want to add towards?
I think a lot of it has been covered in bits and pieces, but I feel that for any company to scale up and be successful, artificial intelligence, machine learning is going to be critical. Good UI UX so that the customer experience is good. Usage of cloud so that it's easy to scale up. Access to data and more data and analytics on that data, and collaboration. Not everyone will have everything, but more partners will come together. Somebody will have capital, somebody will have data, somebody will have capability. It's like going to be a lot of players coming together and creating a better infrastructure. So I think a lot of exciting things in the offing. And for those who are ready, it's going to be a brilliant ride.
So it's ready, steady, and go.
As easy said and done, yeah. But that's what it is, yeah.
Vijay and Hari, both of you also, a quick shot, anything you expect from the ecosystems of the future, a quick 1 minute.
So yeah, I'll just make a quick point. A lot of panelists have already added a lot of great points, so not much left for me to say. But I'd say, like Paroma mentioned, that all the service providers are currently in a stage wherein everybody is trying to do pretty much everything, and there's a lot of confusion as to who is good at what, and there's a lot of competition also. And probably in the future will be more like companies will specialize into one thing, and there'll be a lot of collaboration. I'll just draw an analogy of that on the regulation side as well. So fintech is a big and complex industry, and it has lots of regulations. It needs lots of regulations, and therefore we are going to have multitudes of regulatory agencies. So what I see happening in future is that all those regulatory agencies will also collaborate a lot more, and then they'll come up with like much more coherent regulations, and that will make it much more easy for all the service providers and customers to sort of do the business in a very, very safe and secure manner.
Fantastic. Excellent. Hari, you want to add any last thing before we call it a day?
That's right. I think while Paroma and Samir have more or less encapsulated what we as lenders and fintechs feel, I would say for the agri space, our vision would be fintechs becoming distributors of banking products and banks channeling to more and more in last mile customers through the fintechs. And the RBI is already bringing in enabling regulation and a regulatory ecosystem. So the sandboxing is something we'd be happy. But digitized information has a potential not only for extending credit, but also for providing all kinds of products and services through digitized data. So I would say that gaining a huge amount of traction in the future.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, everyone, for such a beautiful encapsulation. We have had a variety of conversations today, and it was really a challenge for me also to jump from payments to agriculture to lending to technology and complete all this within a span of that 1 hour, which we had to have this conversation. But I am really glad that many of you also came forward and helped me in the technical glitch that I also faced during this conversation. Thank you very much, Samir and Paroma, for stepping in and supporting me in that area. And we really have a lot more to discuss, especially in this field, especially analytics itself is one topic which can go for hours and hours together when getting into each and every area of business, right from risk to compliance to innovations to customer experience. And we all look forward to not just survive in this kind of situation, but next time, when today we have been just come up from a survival phase, but we are fast tracking towards the growth. And let's hope that in the future sessions that we continue, we should have to discuss more about how to manage extensive growth and how to take this growth to the next level together. Great. Thank you very much. I would like to thank each one of you for your valued participation. And I would like to thank Team Google also for being a partner with us in this series of conversation, and look forward to more interesting such sessions with you. Thank you very much, everyone.